All good things must come to an end, even the Marvel Universe, but some endings are better than others. A lot of these endings are pretty predictable, but Deadpool is kind of anything but. Haha, I said but. Of course, with Deadpool, the only thing a person can assume is that his ending will be bonkers, right? And that it is. In his ending, he does his best to save his daughter Ellie, who does age, unlike her immortal dad, from dying by killing Death. Of course, this backfires when Ellie beats her dad at his own game and uses her smarts to take out the both of them together. Aw, so sweet. This also finally frees Wade to be with one of his ultimate lady loves. No, I'm not talking about Vanessa, I'm talking about Death, baby! Of course, he also gives us a few other bonus endings as well for him, but I like the first one the best. Another more atypical ending, Hulk's ending story begins when the world ends. While everyone else is dead, Hulk is the last person to survive on the planet. He spends most of his time roaming and fighting basically rad roaches. He notices though that he's being followed by a golden orb, and later finds out that this orb is monitoring the planet's surface, basically waiting for everything to die. Bruce is perturbed by this revelation, confessing of course that he doesn't want to die, but the robot who has been monitoring the planet with this orb assures him that in time he will. The end is pretty depressing, with Bruce sharing that the robot actually was right and the day did come when he wanted to be dead, but Hulk basically refuses to let him. Yeesh. Is Hulk the most tragic character in the Marvel Universe or what? Who do you think the most tragic character is? Let me know in the comments. I definitely think Hulk is one of them. Although Deadpool is also pretty tragic, to be real with you. In this next story, Thanos is the one responsible for the end of the Marvel Universe. Kind of. He does this not intentionally, though he is aware this was always destined to be his role, his fate, but instead suggests that he may have been a pawn in someone else's game instead, in regards to this. For a long time he was pursuing a mysterious cosmic power, which turned out to be the evil and ancient pharaoh who had retreated to space years ago. The pharaoh Akhenaten. When the pharaoh returns to lay claim to the realms and earth, everyone must band together to try to fight against this threat. Yeah, evil pharaohs. Wasn't expecting that ending for the Marvel Universe. This next story is more focused on the ending of a legacy than the world per se. It focuses on Tony Stark and what happens as he gets to his twilight years. No longer able to continue on as the hero Iron Man due to health-based limitations, he decides to pass the mantle of Iron Man on and basically retire. It's pretty much what you'd expect from Tony if he weren't, to go out in a blaze of glory like he did in the MCU, but instead was just allowed to age out of his role as one of Earth's mightiest heroes and protectors. The heir of the Iron Man mantle ends up being a young scientist that Tony saw potential in, who was working for him, of course. Tony passes on his Iron Man armor to this new hero. How will the Marvel Universe end? Why not in a similar fashion to the ending we imagine for ourselves in our reality? Kind of. Climate catastrophe, war, disease, famine, all of it. And instead of a zombie invasion to top it all off, how about a Red Skull zombie invasion thing? That's what this The End story promises us. From the End story titled The End of Captain America, or just simply Captain America The End. Here Captain America has had to fight tirelessly, he doesn't even know for how long, against an army of Red Skulls. This happened after Red Skull was permanently defeated, yet still the gas he'd created was released into the air. Although Captain America was able to move this gas cloud out over the sea, the change to the Earth's climate made it impossible to actually get rid of. The gas then mutated and caused all those exposed in New York to become crazed and obsessed with Captain America as their faces changed to match the Red Skull himself. Gather round, kids, it's time to hear the story of how one of our greatest heroes ever died. What a lovely story to regale you with, so optimistic, so uplifting, a story for all ages. I love how that is how this next story starts. That's literally how it starts. What a bizarre way to set up a story you're about to tell a group of kids. But I digress. This is the end times, so I guess that's just how it goes sometimes. The story we hear of is how a final showdown happened between Mayhem, April Parker, and Mayday, Spider-Girl, who April of course was a clone of. In this version of the tale, Mayday dies during the fight. Mayhem attempts to replace May so that her family doesn't have to deal with the loss of her, but of course they can tell that April isn't really their daughter. Mayhem's ensuing Mayhem is part of what causes the end of the world in this scenario, and so Auntie M, as we know her, aka, yeah, it's Mayhem, carries on her own legacy as a villain by telling the story of the end of Spider-Girl to each new generation. Even though now she's reformed and actually works more as a hero than a villain, having realized her past mistakes. But you know, obviously she carries a lot of guilt, so she's like, I just want everyone to know that I suck. Not that that really even matters, as April finds a way to travel back in time and warn her past self, causing April in the past to sacrifice herself to save May during their fight. The end! But also, not really at all, because then everything was fixed, so nothing ended. This ending belongs to the Fantastic Four. One last final battle against Doom is how their story ends, although by ending it also returns the team to their status quo, so not exactly an ending. In Fantastic Four: The End, the team is reunited after 20 years. The deaths of both Valeria and Franklin are seemingly what divided them, but they're brought back together to once more face a seemingly returned Doctor Doom. This story is more like Doctor Doom's ending, as after he's dealt with, the team decides to stay together and become a group of heroes once more. Have you ever wondered what would become of Logan were he left to his own devices to live out his days alone? Other than if you haven't watched Old Man Logan, where we kind of talk about that, if you guessed that he would become crazy and paranoid, well, in this story, you'd be right. And I'd say in most stories you're pretty right. I feel like he does usually kind of become a little crazy and paranoid. And as is clearly evident again when we take a look into his ending story called Wolverine: The End. In this tale, Wolverine is living out his days in Canada in isolation. Despite getting older and slowing down somewhat, he's still overall pretty tough. After Sabretooth dies, Wolverine is invited to the funeral. In his later years, Victor Creed apparently redeemed himself, with many of his friends attending his funeral and even crying over his loss. Which is also honestly pretty weird considering that Victor has done so many terrible things in the past, but I guess he really redeemed himself. He must have done a lot of good stuff to make up for that. While Wolverine of course doesn't feel quite the same about the loss of Victor, unsurprisingly, he does regret that there was never anything more between them than a rivalry, hoping that one day some big connection between them would be revealed to make sense of all that had transpired between them. Instead, he is gifted a letter from Sabretooth's estate that sends him down a road that seems to be guiding him back towards Weapon X and hopefully recovering the memories his healing factor has taken from him in his past as a result of his trauma. Next up, this has to be one of the most brutal endings that we've gotten thus far, and of course, it belongs to none other than the Punisher. In The Punisher: The End, the world ends by way of war. Peace talks basically fall apart, and missiles are dropped. The whole world is nuked, and the Punisher, held in Sing Sing, finds out who is behind it all when William Teacher, one of the other prisoners there, dies and confesses his involvement with the people who are basically behind all of it. Turns out here that capitalism is to blame, and so Punisher tracks down the men responsible who William Teacher built the bunkers for and takes those people out, even at the risk of his own life, which also doesn't surprise me. This is Frank Castle. This isn't of course when the radiation is dropped to safe levels. Instead, they're basically just low enough for Frank to make the trip to where the last surviving big businessmen are holed up in New York. It's about as brutal as you'd imagine a Punisher Max story to be, and while it is honestly a bit much for my tastes, I do love the art here. It's grotesque and it's really great, just really fits the tone really well. As I said in my intro, some endings are better than others, and honestly this next ending was one of the best for me on all levels. The art, the story, the characterization, written by Kelly Thompson with art by Carmen Carnero, it's probably the best one I've read thus far of the Marvel endings that we've got. Here Carol has been flying around out in space for years after getting a distress call from Earth, heading back that way only to find out while en route that she'd actually be too late and everyone was already gone. Whew. She still went back to Earth to confirm that, there were no survivors, and was heartbroken to find out that that was true. The villain who had threatened the planet wasn't even there either vanquished or having lost interest, we don't know. We don't even know who was behind it all. As such, Captain Marvel flies back out and makes her future from there among the stars, acting as a protector of many different worlds in the cosmos, one of the last known survivors seemingly of Earth. However, years after receiving that distress call, she gets a message on her communicator from Earth that reads, "Avengers Assemble." And I don't think I want to spoil this one for you. It's there and it's honestly pretty great. If you want to give it a read, I would recommend it. I really liked it and I thought it was really cute. That's about it. I've been me, Amanda McKnight, and until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube.